External temperature, -70 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric toxicity at 12%. Welcome to Kalen Prime. Classification, Class 9 Deathworld. The ship's automated survival computer was entirely too cheerful for a vessel that had just been torn out of the sky. The Wandering Star, a sleek, deep space exploratory vessel belonging to the Galactic Coalition, was currently half buried in the side of a jagged, ice-covered mountain. The emergency lights flickered, casting long, erratic amber shadows across the freezing bridge. Captain Syna, a reptilian sylph with brilliant emerald scales, wrapped her forearms tightly around her torso. Her scales were already turning a dull, sickly gray. Her species was cold-blooded. They required ambient heat simply to keep their hearts beating. "Damage report," Syna whispered, her breath forming a thick cloud of white vapor in the freezing air. "Main drive is gone, Captain," her first officer chattered, his mandibles clicking uncontrollably. "Life support is running on auxiliary batteries. We have maybe 2 hours of internal heat left. But that isn't the worst of it." Syna closed her primary eyes. "Tell me." "The magnetic interference from the planetary storm outside is blocking our distress beacon. The signal can't pierce the ionosphere from down here in the valley. We would need to manually carry the transmitter to the peak of the ridge about 3 kilometers above us to get a signal out." The bridge fell entirely silent. Outside the shattered viewport, a violent, shrieking blizzard was tearing across the landscape. The wind howled like a dying animal, slamming walls of solid ice and snow against the fragile hull of the crashed ship, a Class 9 Deathworld. To the Coalition, it meant a planet completely hostile to biological life. Extreme gravity, predatory weather, temperatures that would flash freeze the blood in an alien's veins in minutes. "Then we are dead," Syna said softly, accepting her fate with a quiet dignity. "No environmental suit on this ship is rated for -70 degrees with gale force winds. The thermal lining would crack in 3 minutes. Our bodies would shut down in 4. "I don't know about that, Captain." The voice came from the rear of the bridge. Syna turned her head slowly, her stiff neck joints popping. Carter, the ship's human mechanic, was digging through an emergency supply locker. Unlike the rest of the crew, who were huddled together for warmth, Carter was moving with purpose. "Carter," Syna hissed, her voice weak. "Stop wasting your energy. Conserve your core temperature. No time for that, Cap." Carter grunted. He pulled a heavy, insulated industrial parka out of the locker and threw it over his standard-issue uniform. He began wrapping a thick thermal scarf around his neck and face. If the beacon needs to go to the ridge, then it needs to go to the ridge. Hand it over. The first officer stared at the human in horror. "Are you insane? You are a biological organism. Humans do not possess heavy fur. You do not have blubber. Your skin is thin and completely unarmored. If you step out of that airlock, the wind will cut right through you. You will freeze solid." Carter picked up the heavy, cylindrical distress beacon, locking it onto the magnetic clip on his heavy utility belt. He pulled a pair of thick, heated work gloves onto his hands and grabbed a solid steel pry-bar to use as a walking stick. "My species evolved on a Class 10 Deathworld," Carter said, his voice muffled behind the thick scarf. "You guys classify planets based on how fast they kill you. We classify them based on what kind of jacket we need to wear." Syna tried to stand, but her legs buckled. "Carter, Earth's extreme environments are a biological anomaly. You cannot survive this. The wind chill alone is pushing -100 degrees." Carter pulled a pair of heavy, tinted goggles down over his eyes. He looked at the shivering, dying alien crew, then looked out the shattered window at the howling, violent whiteout conditions. "I grew up in a place called Manitoba," Captain Carter said. "This isn't a death world. It's just February." He turned and hit the manual release for the airlock. The inner doors hissed shut behind him, locking the freezing alien crew safely inside. Through the internal cameras, they watched Carter step into the decompression chamber. He didn't wear a pressurized environmental suit. He didn't have a portable thermal generator. He just had layers of fabric, a steel bar, and a terrifying amount of stubbornness. The outer airlock doors groaned open. The storm hit him like a physical blow. A wall of pure, blinding white snow and razor-sharp ice crystals blasted into the chamber. The wind shrieked, a deafening roar that shook the heavy metal bulkheads. On the bridge, the crew watched the telemetry from Carter's biometric suit monitor. His external temperature reading immediately plummeted to -75 degrees. Carter leaned forward into the wind. And he stepped out into the storm to the Coalition. Cold was a paralyzing agent. It slowed the nervous system, induced lethargy, and gently put the victim to sleep. But humanity didn't go quietly into the cold. Human biology fought back with violent, aggressive efficiency. As the extreme cold penetrated Carter's layers, his body immediately triggered its deep survival protocols. His capillaries constricted, aggressively pulling warm blood away from his skin and forcing it deep into his core to protect his vital organs. His muscles began to fire in rapid, microscopic spasms, shivering, actively burning calories to generate raw internal thermal energy. He plunged his steel bar into the knee-deep snow, bracing himself against a gust of wind that threatened to throw him off the mountain. One step. Then another. Back on the ship, Syna watched the biometric feed in absolute disbelief. "His core temperature," the first officer whispered, staring at the screen. "It's not dropping. It's holding steady at 37 degrees Celsius. How is that possible? The ambient cold should be draining his heat instantly." "He is generating his own heat," Syna said. Her voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "His body is a high-yield furnace. He is literally burning his own internal energy reserves to fight the environment." Outside, the mountain was doing everything in its power to kill the human. The incline grew steeper. The air grew thinner. The atmospheric toxicity began to eat at the exposed fabric of his coat. Every step required Carter to lift his leg out of deep, heavy snow, fight the resistance of the gale-force wind, and plant his foot on unstable, slippery ice. It was a brutal, agonizing display of kinetic endurance. His lungs burned with every breath of the freezing, thin air. Frost began to accumulate on his goggles, freezing his eyelashes and covering his scarf in a thick layer of solid white ice. He looked less like a biological creature and more like a massive, unstoppable golem of snow and steel. 1 hour passed. Then 2. Carter's heart rate was pounding at 160 beats per minute. His legs were screaming, flooded with lactic acid. But humanity was built for persistence hunting. They were designed to outlast, outwalk, and outsuffer anything else on the planet. He reached the summit. The peak of the ridge was fully exposed to the worst of the storm. The wind here was deafening, a relentless physical force trying to tear him off the rock. Carter dropped to his knees. His heavy, thickly gloved hands were numb, clumsy blocks of ice. He fumbled with the magnetic clip on his belt, his fingers refusing to bend properly. He gritted his teeth, letting out a raw, guttural roar of frustration, and forced his frozen muscles to obey. The beacon clicked free. He slammed it down onto the solid rock of the summit, twisting the heavy arming dial until it locked into place. A bright, blinding beam of pure blue light shot upward, piercing directly through the howling whiteout and punching a hole straight into the upper atmosphere. The distress signal was away. Carter slumped backward into the snow, his chest heaving violently. On the bridge, the crew let out a collective, weak gasp of relief as the computer confirmed the signal had reached the orbital relay. Rescue was coming. Syna looked at the biometric feed. Carter's heart rate was slowing. His energy reserves were finally beginning to fail. "Carter," Syna spoke into the comms, her voice trembling. "The signal is away. You did it. But you must find shelter. Your core temperature is dropping. Dig a snow cave. Wait for the rescue ships." Static crackled over the radio for a long time. Then, the heavy, rhythmic crunch of boots hitting the snow echoed through the feed. "Negative, Captain." Carter's voice came through. It was strained, exhausted, and incredibly dry. "I left my good thermos of coffee on the navigation console. If it freezes, I'm going to be very annoyed." Through the external cameras, they saw a terrifying shape emerge from the blinding storm. It was entirely covered in ice. Frost coated its shoulders, its face obscured by frozen goggles and a hardened scarf. It moved slowly, painfully, but with an unstoppable mechanical rhythm. The human had beaten the Deathworld on the way up. And now, he was walking back down.